So the Ting Tings are a British pop duo who you might know best for their hits from back in 2008, like Great DJ, Shut Up and Let Me Go, and especially the undeniably infectious That's Not My Name. They managed to really separate themselves from the other dance rock trends of the 2000s, thanks to some subtle electronics, almost hypnotically repetitive grooves and lyrics, and a very upbeat, peppy delivery of frontwoman Katie White that almost went to these cheerleader-like chants that just added a lot of fun to those songs. However, as good as most of the songs on that debut album, We Started Nothing, are, I couldn't help but feel like there was sort of a uniform sound throughout. Like, what we got on there was all well and good, but things would really risk getting boring if they just rehashed that for the next album. Unfortunately, 4 years later, they did the exact opposite with the criminally underappreciated Sounds from Nowheresville. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a sucker for an album with a ton of diversity, and this was pretty much the epitome of that. Sure, you had a couple songs in there that continued that early sound that were really good, but you also saw them delving into styles like garage rock, soul music, new wave, pop country, house music, and pulling them all off shockingly well, thanks partially to the fairly minimalist pop approach they have in their songwriting that really pulled it all together and kept things from getting too ridiculous where they very easily could have gone. Needless to say, I was really interested when I heard that the follow-up Supercritical was coming out. Would they just keep getting crazier and crazier, or would they just react to the commercial success drop-off of Sounds from Nowheresville and just retreat to the sound that made fans happy in hopes of staying relevant? Well, in a way, a little of both. For the former, there's one undeniable influence that's running throughout a good majority of this album that the Ting Tings have always kind of hinted at throughout their career but never really dived headfirst into. Disco. The other half of the duo and multi-instrumentalist Jules DiMartino has said that they're really influenced by the sounds of Studio 54 in the late 70s, and it really shows here. Do It Again is the clearest example of this, between the 16th note hi-hats and the drumming, the hand claps, the funky bass, the clean high-string guitar chords, and Katie's presence behind the microphone that does definitely call back to that era. Not to mention that the lead single, Wrong Club, basically sounds like what would happen if the Ting Tings had a feature on Random Access Memories. Now, admittedly, I kind of dismissed these songs at first because I felt like they were sort of a cash grab on that whole disco revival thing going on now that Daft Punk helped kickstart. But then I realized that, like I said earlier in this review, they've been tiptoeing around this style for over 6 years now, so why wouldn't they just delve straight into it at some point, especially given that this album is produced entirely by Andy Taylor, the former guitarist of Duran Duran. That being said, there's definitely more influences running through this album than just that. I love the straightforward pop rock approach of Only Love that definitely recalls their first album, the infectious and unabashedly 80s synths and melodies of Communication and Failure, beautifully serene and simple slow burner Wabi Sabi, and the quirky and eccentric Daughter. That's really the only time Katie uses that shouting approach on this album. The only songs here that don't really work for me at all are the title track, thanks to some sloppy lyrics, production, and mixing that just kills the whole thing for me, and Green Poison, an embarrassingly bad wannabe weed anthem that just feels like some deformed mishmash of every sound on this album combined in the worst possible way. Look guys, this album's 9 songs and 31 minutes long. There is no excuse for filler this blatant. While we're on gripes, my main issue with this album, and the thing that's really keeping me from loving it, is that for all the compliments I gave it on certain tracks, I get this nagging feeling that's not really as substantial as either of their previous albums. I don't know, maybe it's the occasional lack of the tightness and songcraft that helped make the Ting Tings so enjoyable to begin with in the past. Maybe it's the insanely short length of this album that makes it kind of feel a little rushed. Or maybe it's just the fact they're following up such a scatterbrained album with a more focused one. Either way, this is a decently enjoyable pop album, and I'm going to give it a 7. It's nothing I really see topping any year-end lists, but if you're a sucker for that disco revival sound, or just throwbacks in general that keep the songwriting relatively solid, then it's at least worth a listen or two. What do you guys think of Supercritical? Do you agree with what I just say? Disagree? Have any feedback about the channel in general? Let me know in the comments down below. Share this around with anyone who might be interested. Like the Facebook page in the description for updates and commentaries, music news, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode of Spin It Reviews.